The Candid Frame is supported by donations by listeners just like you. Help us to bring you great conversations with great photographers. Support the show today with your monthly contribution through our Patreon effort at patreon.com/The Candid Frame, or click on the link in the show notes or the website at thecandidframe.com. Thank you.
This is Ibadian X, and this is The Candid Frame. Whenever we travel, we have a chance to see and discover new things. Breaking out of our day-to-day routine becomes an invaluable part of life, not only because it gets us out of our daily rut, but it also provides us a much-needed perspective of how we live our lives. This is especially the case when you find yourself in the midst of another culture. But to really experience a place, you have to do more than just book the flight. It's far too easy to travel hundreds, if not thousands of miles and simply be a tourist whose experience is superficial. Arriving at a destination, jumping out of a car or a bus to make a selfie, and then being off to the next location is no way to have a genuine experience. There is something special to be had when you get to experience a new world through the eyes of someone who not only lives there, but who also loves the place. That's Alastair McLachlan, who, like last week's guest Anton Bozeman, has a passion for the city of Johannesburg, South Africa. Through his images and his stories, I was able to have yet another perspective on a city that is as rich in its beauty as it is in its contradictions. With the help of Alastair, I not only found a unique way of seeing his city, but also my own. Well, thanks for sitting down and talking with me. I really appreciate it, man.
Pleasure, thank you.
I have to say, I really enjoyed your presentation the other day. And it's been really interesting to discover Johannesburg, not only through my own exploration, but through your photographs and Anton's and some of the other people who've presented. And it's been really fascinating to discover the city for the first time in such personal ways. The project that we saw during the presentation was during a time that you lived in a certain apartment or flat, but that was at a point where you were coming back to Johannesburg. Is that right?
I came to Johannesburg for the first time in 2000.
Okay.
I had a multimedia exhibition, and just decided to stay on.
And you were coming from where?
Natal Midlands. I was at university at Pietermaritzburg University, but originally grew up in north of Pretoria in a small town called Hammanskraal.
So what did you expect Johannesburg to be when you first came here? Did you have any sort of expectations, good, bad, or indifferent, about the city when you first came here?
I didn't have any expectations, but I knew from an early age that I never wanted to live in Johannesburg.
Why is that?
My grandmother used to live in what's now called Midrand, but it's halfway house.
Mm-hmm.
So in going to visit her, we used to drive past Johannesburg on the highway quite often. It was just this facade, this silhouette with... Back then, I guess the smog wasn't bad. It wasn't something that you could visually notice. But in comparison to having grown up on farms,
mm-hmm.
it just seemed so foreign to me. So, in terms of a lifestyle choice, it just didn't seem like a place I wanted to be.
And then all of a sudden, you find yourself living here.
Yeah.
So, how was that transition, considering what you were coming from?
Well, it was huge. It was. I think ultimately the curiosity got the better of me. The exhibition was a really good process for me. I'd worked through an experience of having lost something quite dear. So it was quite a cathartic personal exhibition for me at the time, and it was something about just having constant contact with people. As an introvert and someone having come from a rural area, it wasn't something I sought out. I was quite comfortable with being in my own presence, being quiet, having time alone. Maybe there was a sense that I needed to put myself out there a bit, but it was just something so foreign that led me to want to kind of explore that a bit more.
You were taking these images from your space, which is elevated and overlooks the street, the buildings. When you saw that, was it when you started creating images? Was there an intentionality behind it almost immediately, or was it sort of like, oh, that looks kind of cool, let me make a couple of pictures, and then it evolved into something else?
There was absolutely no intentionality. In a sense, it was the same idea as moving to Johannesburg in the first place. Photography for me is more of a sense of trying to understand a moment, keeping it still for long enough so that I can digest it. And I tend to digest things quite slowly. Yeah, I mean, I was in a foreign place. Essentially, I'd gone from having my feet firmly on the ground to being up in the air. I didn't realize psychologically at the time what effect that was having. I actually remember going to visit my grandmother once and walking in the front door, out the back door, taking my shoes off and putting my feet on the grass. And it dawned on me, like, it was so real for me that I had moved so far away from the even the person that I knew. So the me taking photographs. I mean, I didn't really consider myself a photographer. I studied painting. The photography took over. I was using photography as reference material for my paintings, and the photography slowly took after. And I guess the subject matter was so different for me, from having been fascinated with literally the land itself, the elements, fire, earth, water, and air, that I didn't really know how to engage with this new subject matter.
Yeah.
And it was so foreign that it was completely exploratory in the beginning, and it was very macro in the beginning. I had to try and take it all in all its detail. That discovery process led me from that macro to the micro, to starting to realize that I had neighbors, that there were lives going on right next to mine that were just completely foreign to my upbringing. Yeah, it was just a completely exploratory.
For people who have not seen your images yet, can you describe what you mean by macro? What would these macro images look like? Because this is not someone with a macro lens taking a picture of a nail on his table. They're talking completely something different here. But if you could describe what that was.
Okay, in terms of my experience, Johannesburg City, I had traveled internationally, I think, but I'd never really come to grips with the scope of a city, the vastness of a city. And Joburg's not particularly big as far as cities go, but it was huge for me. My vantage point from very much the very center of Johannesburg, I could pretty much take it all in. So when I mean macro, I mean the sky down to street level. I mean, with a wide angle lens, trying to take everything in as possible. And I think my progression of the way I saw progressed from, well, I think it was very natural. I think anyone giving that amount of time in that context would firstly see it the way I saw it, in terms of the vastness of the city, the concrete, but just. Yeah, I mean, I was quite literally, I was attracted to the sunsets, the sunrises, the thunder showers. Even on another level, just the sound, which strangely was a bit like the sound of the sea. There's a rhythm to the sounds of the city. Yeah. Macro, as in it was the context I've found myself in, and I had to come to terms with the bigger picture, so to speak, before I could really start being fascinated with the smaller elements.
Becoming comfortable with a city is always, especially when you're sort of new, and especially when you're from a very different environment, and you're an artist as well. That can be sort of a journey in and of itself, that as you get more comfortable and you get more accustomed to being in a space, you can see it and experience it in a different way. Do you think that played a big part in terms of how it went from what you initially did in terms of the sort of macro perception to something much different?
Yes, but there was also there was something quite. I think for the most part I'm quite subconscious. Definitely the pictures come before the words. I was dealing with a very real perception of Johannesburg that I heard talked about in sort of rumors and horror stories, and the general impression it just wasn't a safe place to go. It was a no-go zone, and a lot of what drew me. Well, I wouldn't say that drew me to it, but I just wouldn't believe it until I understood it, understood it myself. When the chance came up to move Johannesburg, it wasn't even an option. It was right then and there. Let's just do it. If I'm going to live in Joburg, I want to live in Joburg.
The images that you have in the exhibit from your flat when you're looking down, I love learning that you come from a painterly background, because that is really evident when you take a look at the photographs. Not just in terms of composition, but just in terms of feel and moment. I felt that as graphically pleasing as those images are in terms of line, in terms of shape, in terms of the human gesture that I see in those, there was a feeling. I'm searching for the perfect word for it, but it's kind of eluding me. But there was such a genuineness to the moments that you captured there that I really loved. The biggest compliment that I can give any photograph is that they wanted me to linger, and that's what your pictures did. They wanted me to linger and take them in. When you were making the photographs, how were you experiencing those moments? Was it strictly from a sort of a painterly aesthetic, or were you sort of tapped into this thing that I'm talking about that I felt I was experiencing from the photographs?
Well, firstly, thank you. If there's one thing that as an artist I'm trying to do is literally stop time for someone. It's very easy to browse past things. So if I can get someone to linger, then that's first prize. Then that's great. I've never really considered the connection between the painting and the photographs, except in the sense that I've always been naturally drawn to the derelict and the mundane. Mm-hmm. And previous to, in between the painting and having moved to Johannesburg, I did a documentary project on South African drive-ins, which was a real thing.
Okay.
I mean, we all think drive-ins, Americana, ice cream cones, and stuff. But we had at one time about 250 drive-ins in South Africa. I was certainly not overtly political at the time, but I would come across some drive-ins with a 2-meter high wall right down the center of the tarmac. Just such anomalies like that. Which there's a line which sort of accompanies most of my artist statements, and it's about Joburg. It's about conveying the reality of the social context, but leaving some space for your imagination. There's a sense of a hope and a dream in the potential of what it could become. So having a photograph or a painting be visually arresting first is for me important. Even though I'd know, and I've become accustomed to the fact that from other people's perspectives, a lot of what I was depicting was quite depressing, not interesting, boring. So I'd kind of given up on any sort of popular notion, and yet as a visual person, that's what always caught me first. In terms of visual aesthetics, I was looking for moments that were pleasing to my eye, and at the same time the pictures of the city had something else they wanted to tell me.
Right.
Yeah, in the sense that the macro and the sunsets and the sunrises were romantic postcards about, and I accidentally started running a venue at the time, so I was encouraging other people to come into the CBD, into Johannesburg, to ignore their perceptions, to give themselves a chance to come and re-experience Joburg and make up their own minds instead of. And part and parcel of that was making Joburg look good, making Joburg look like it was worth visiting. I think the pictures that you're referring to, the ones from the exhibition, they came a little bit later.
What I appreciate about those images, especially when it is about a city that has a quote-unquote sort of gritty reputation, is that there's a tendency to want to idealize the location, to basically create a fantasy of what people would like to think it is. And that means excluding certain imagery to sort of hide it. Your images don't do that. Your images show real, genuine moments that some people would consider ugly or not worthy of a photograph. But within the context of the frame that you create, that is not only part and parcel of the story, but it also is an integral part of what makes it beautiful. So I like the fact that you're not trying to obscure that or delete that in order to convince people that there is something of worth in the city.
I do still edit. There are still things that I don't show. That's not so much the fact that I don't think they're visually arresting or interesting. My issue with some of that is a sense of a breach in privacy.
Oh, okay.
And even the portraits that I take of people in Joburg, I don't necessarily consider portraits. At least as much as a beautiful photograph of Johannesburg, a sunset or a sunrise or something like that, is a portrait of Johannesburg. I see my pictures of people as portraits of Johannesburg.
Okay.
In terms of the privacy, I've edited in a sense archetypally, so that a moment that I witness in Joburg is not so much a personal moment, but it stands as an archetype for a greater social context. And in that sense, I've tried to avoid recognizable features. I think I'm very aware of the politics behind representing people. So I've chosen deliberately to in a sense distance the viewer from the discomfort of witnessing essentially what's a very voyeuristic moment. And my intention is to say that this is not a single moment. This is happening all the time, all around Joburg.
Is part of that self-editing process involved concerns about stereotypes?
Not mine personally,
okay,
but the general perception. Not a stereotypical kind of person. I have doubts about concrete statements. So for me, it's never really been an issue about the stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I can see where you're going. There is that, unfortunately. Put it this way: on occasion, I've deliberately pushed my sense in comfort in terms of what I make public, in the hope that I've exhibited some of these pictures for 6 to 8 years. Some I feel are contentious. I think that line needs to be explored to the point where I'm inviting criticism. I know that I'm open for it, but no one has yet cornered me. No one has yet said anything, as much as like laugh it off. That one's a bit too much for me, especially in respect to nudity, and especially the nudity of children. But I think it's an important debate to be having. So I would invite that sort of criticism, which I know I'm guilty of in terms of who I am in South Africa and my upbringing. It's problematic for a white person on top of a roof to be taking candid photographs of people of other races.
Yeah.
And yet I don't think that any other person with an interest in their environment would do it anyway, would see it anyway. I think given the time, I don't think there's a problem with the looking. Ultimately, it's in a public space. I don't think there's a problem in the photographing. There is a blurred line where I choose to exhibit, and on top of that, maybe profit from the images.
Yeah. I mean, I bring it up just because it came to mind while looking at the photographs and you describing the editing process. Because for me, as a person of color, I'm very aware of stereotyping, particularly when I'm photographing. Not that dissuades me from making the photographs, but I have a consciousness about it. It really came to the fore last night. We were critiquing images for a contest that involved street photography. And there were certain images that when I saw them on the screen, I had a visceral reaction to. Not because it portrayed anyone in a negative light, but it was something that I'm familiar with and I'm very sort of resistant to. I don't know if that makes any sense.
You didn't get that feeling from some of mine?
No, I didn't get that from you at all.
Okay.
What I saw in some of the images that I saw last night was an objectification. It was this thing I'm photographing. They weren't really sort of a human beings. They were just fodder for a photograph. When I looked at your images, I saw the human figures in certain situations, very vulnerable positions. But for me, I saw those people occupying and existing within a space. And it wasn't so much the activity of this particular person that was sort of under your microscope. It was this moment, this person within the context of that moment. And I felt that, if anything, it wasn't so much about their race or their sex as it was about their humanity. You have a couple of shots in there with people bathing. I totally get that whole idea of privacy, especially in that particular sort of state. But I felt that even though we don't see these people, and even though they didn't grant you permission to do it, I think that you afforded them a sense of dignity, even though they may never be aware of the photograph. That was lacking in some of the images. And I know it's really hard to quantify on an audio podcast to show, okay, this is the difference between the two. But I think there is I think behind all that is an intention in terms of the photographer. Maybe not a conscious one in terms of, oh, this is how I want to represent people, but a sort of subconscious one in terms of how the photographer, the person behind the camera, is choosing to see that person within the context of what they're trying to create. So it's kind of long-winded. Hope that makes sense. But
that does make sense. Look, it's not that I'm not making assumptions. I'm engaged in a reality which is very, very different from mine, and yet, I mean, I don't jump to conclusions easily. So I'm open to my assumptions having or being changed over time. But I think what might be an interesting thing to juxtapose with my current images, and it's something that I'm planning at the moment, is to print some proofs of the photographs I've taken, and perhaps see if I can't track some of my subjects down.
Oh, okay.
And I wouldn't. Besides, time having passed, I don't think I'm pretty sure I'll be able to find some of them, and it would be interesting for me to test my assumptions against their reality. On some level, I felt like an outsider coming into Joburg, and I guess the very fact that I chose to go into Joburg says something about me as well. But I don't. I'm going very roundabout.
It's perfectly okay. This is a podcast, so you can go roundabout. You can dive underneath the table, come up for water.
But the thing is, I don't know if I've answered your question, and it's these kind of things which will play in my mind. For days, because I need the answers.
I completely understand that we're diving deep.
Yeah,
because I'm inspired to go in deep with you. With some people, I don't necessarily feel the need to. I just feel so engaged with the work, and just in talking with you over the last couple of days, I've just felt so simpatico with you, even though our approaches and our subject matter are very different. When I was listening to you, I go, I get this guy. And I just felt, with both you and Anton, I just felt a connection, a synergy, a respect, even without really knowing you. All I did, I just saw your pictures and I saw this guy talk for a bit, and all of a sudden, and believe me, I've seen a lot of photographers show their work and talk, and it didn't make that impression with me. And I think it's been really a fascinating experience for me that I've traveled this far, halfway around the world, and I'm having this experience. And it may be part and parcel of the jet lag, and the fact that I'm in a completely different environment. But I think it's certainly sort of more than that. But there's another question I wanted to get to, which speaks more about the photographic process. Is because you were photographing from your flat, you were seeing the same scenes basically the foundation of the scenes, the setting, the stage on which all this stuff was happening over and over and over again over a period of years. And as a photographer who's turning their lens to that, you get to see this sort of dynamic change, flux, transitions, not only in terms of time of year and weather, but just the flow of people and how those settings can be transformed not only from day to day or season to season, but like minute by minute. And, you know, when you're photographing, I'm wondering how that sort of factored into your process, where, you know, is it you just grabbing shots when you can? Was there some sort of after a while that you just have, you know, what led you during that time that you were there to say, I'm going to make pictures now?
And this goes back to sort of the intentionality. So we moved into the rooftop in 2003. We had as many house parties as we could, or try to get people to come and see Joburg from that vantage point. And by accident, we started a venue and a gallery. So it became a sort of, the idea of bringing people into town became a sort of professionalized, if you like. And that drew me a bit away from my art. I'd essentially, without knowing it, put on a completely different hat. I'd become a business owner in the CBD. And it's probably also the reason for the switch between the painting and the photography, because the photography was more immediate.
Right.
And it was, again, without any intention, but it was just a way for me to sort of keep a foot in the door, to keep that open, even though I didn't feel like I was digesting it a lot. A lot of photographers approach a photograph with a very concrete idea, something that they want to communicate. For me, it was more about saving it for later, so that it would give me time to digest. And I wasn't digesting. I wasn't thinking about the pictures I was taking. There wasn't any forethought or planning or something. So photography, what was problematic about what I was doing for me was the fact that I wasn't really doing it consciously at all. And maybe there's a naive charm to that as well. So it just became a part-time thing. It was only having left the venue and stopped running the space that I knew I had a huge curiosity and also a bit of a responsibility towards an archive. I knew that I had to, in the process of unpacking the disappointment of having lost the venue, the photographs were a constant reminder to me, a reference of the time that had passed.
Right.
So it's an important document in terms of, for me personally, and yet also I think given the timing of it, that change in Johannesburg was happening at an accelerated rate. We're talking post 94, obviously, and yet as a 10-12 year project, it was a relatively seminal part in the development of Johannesburg.
Since you've left the flat, how long ago has it been now?
3 years.
So how has your creativity as a photographer changed as a result of not having that platform from which to create?
Well, I'm trying to be disciplined about it. I'm consciously, and I don't know if this is the right decision or not, but I'm consciously almost trying to hold myself back from creating new content, because I feel like I need to hold this project in its entirety without adding new layers. Okay. There's been so many layers through the years that I feel like I need to come to terms with what exactly I've done, and I feel like I'm currently and very intentionally in an editing phase,
right.
And it's about how to extract an essence or a meaning, and how I package that in terms of how I communicate, not the message. Sorry, this comes back to something you said a little earlier. It's about the humanity that I'm glad you see as evident in the photographs, because it comes with a slight bittersweet taste. So without trying to package it in the sense that I'm trying to make a fully fledged statement about the archive, I want that sense to come through, that this is real, it can be beautiful, and yet they are also evidence of symptoms, social symptoms that need addressing.
Yeah. I mean, when you were back at the restaurant where you were talking about trying to figure it out, not sure exactly what you're doing, that makes perfect sense to me in terms of the editing process. For me, that's the second point of discovery. The first point of discovery is when I'm making the pictures. The second point is when I'm looking at not just a single image, when I'm looking at a body of work and I'm trying to figure out what the F was I doing. Because for me, I'm not like you. I'm not conscious about any of those things. I just know I'm just making whatever I need to make. And it's only later in retrospect when I'm trying to filter through all this stuff that I not only decide but discover what was going on. And that seems to be exactly what you're talking about.
It is, but in a sense, it's quite strange because the photography was not necessarily my first point of discovery. The camera was simply a viewfinder at the time, and as I said, I didn't even feel like I was taking it in on the level that I feel like I should have been. It was just purely a recording device. So I'm throwing level 1 and 2 and 3 possibly into the editing phase.
You're throwing everything on the wall and seeing what sticks.
And part of the problem is that is the difficulty for me is in dealing with the volume.
12 years is a long time, yeah.
So 12 years just by themselves is a lot, but given my own personal development and feelings along the way, that's another layer on top of that, which sort of complicates in the sense I need to try and divorce myself from the person I am now, trying to make theoretical artist statement sense out of something, and the sense of the beauty and the naivety at which I saw it in the first place, and all of this as a practice, as a workflow, as a methodology, trying to come to grips with how to package it when what I want to say in one file, just put it all on the table. Here's 12 years, you take it in, which might take people a long time. I'm conscious that I need to break it down for myself and for audiences, so that that essence comes through without any dilution.
So for you, what's the singular thing that you find most difficult about this process? I know there are a lot of considerations, but is there sort of a singular thing that you can point to that is the thing that you have to struggle against in order to achieve what you just described?
I don't know. I really don't know. Look, I'm going to try. Honesty. I think it's very important for me to try and be honest to the archive. I mean, it is a document of a time in Johannesburg's history, which after all is what I kind of hold on a higher level. So I want to treat that document with the respect that I think it deserves. But the presentation for me is key. I'm glad that you seem to have picked up a sense, and you verbalized it in a way that I'm grateful for, because it says to me that it kind of communicates that it feels like I'm getting something right. But yeah, it's that and being succinct in a way without leaving anything out. So in terms of the editing process, going from 40,000 images down to 10, which is a discipline which I'm slowly learning. Those 10 images, because they stand in for moments, days, years, the entire archive, those are very important choices to be made. And there's a very clear divide for me between the architectural macro pictures of Joburg and the personal portraits, and I'm not quite sure. Certainly, there's a combination in that which I'm struggling with. Look, I mean, I would love to continue just doing this. I think it's important for me. I think it can be important in a broader context, in terms of coming to helping other people understand Joburg. So what's important to me is also trying to make it feasible in terms of the time I invest, and I'm trapped in a sense between marketing and selling myself as a person who makes Joburg look good, and a person who makes Joburg feel personal and
Right.
and interesting and something worth engaging in.
I so appreciate you being willing to be open and honest about the process, because most photographers don't like talking about when they're in that nebulous place of trying to figure it out. They either come out with this very clearly defined evaluation of their own work, or they'll bullshit. Right? And I'm glad that you're doing neither of that, because it really helps me in terms of how I think about my own work. So thanks for that. My last question, it's a question that I ask each guest, and I ask them to recommend another photographer for our listeners to discover and explore. And it can be anyone, someone you've long admired or someone you've recently discovered. So who would that photographer be and why?
Thank you, firstly. I'm so bad at this kind of thing. People, I mean, I only found out...
Every guest that's on that show can say exactly the same thing.
I only found about Cartier-Bresson like a month ago.
Okay.
It's just, I mean, I'm that bad. I think I have two sort of standout historic photographers that have been the measure for me in terms of they're both photographers that I firstly I like on a visual level.
Mm-hmm.
One of which is more familiar to my particular style.
Okay.
The other is something which I appreciate but just could never possibly achieve. It's not something and that difference is in literally shooting from the hip and creating realities, and I think both of them are equally important. Maybe these are not very good examples, but I love Jan Saudek in terms of his project he did in the window, where he was created fantasies. La Chapelle is just for me someone whose work I really appreciate, but is just I'm just not. Yeah, I mean, I guess at nature I'm lean more towards the documentary, but so I really appreciate some photographers who can create their own worlds. Mm-hmm. And I'm missing someone, I can't remember his name right now.
It's okay. You got some good ones in there. So thank you so much, man. It really was a pleasure to get to know you better.
Thanks so much.
Thanks again for joining us, and for Alastair for sharing his story. To find out more about Alastair and his work, follow him on Instagram at Intermission. That's INTERMISSION. And thank you for your continued support of The Candid Frame. If you haven't already, please take the time today to write a review in the iTunes Store. Your ratings and comments help people to discover the great conversations that we offer here at TCF. Thanks to Victor Transfina from the US and Mad Jeff from the UK for their 5-star reviews. You can also support the show by making a monthly contribution through Patreon. Visit patreon.com/The Candid Frame, or you'll find a link in the show notes and the Candid Frame website. Or if you just want to make a one-time contribution to the show, you can do so via PayPal by clicking on the donate button on the Candid Frame website or in the show notes. Thanks to listener Diana Green for her generous contribution. It makes a big difference. Thank you. To access our complete archive of interviews, download the free Candid Frame app, available for Apple iOS, Android, and Windows. It's the fastest and most convenient way to hear and save any of the great interviews we present here at TCF. Links for each can be found in the show notes and the website at thecandidframe.com. The Candid Frame's audio engineer is Martin Taylor, who you can find at theothermartintaylor.com. The show's senior producer is Cynthia Parker, and our music is from Kevin MacLeod, whose royalty-free music can be found at incompetech.com. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at simply @IbarianX. And this is IbarianX, and this is The Candid Frame.